Waiting to hear from
the
family
of
George Floyd and their reaction. They've been speaking with the president and vice president. We are expecting to hear from them. Gail?
Thanks, Nora. You know, right now we're waiting to hear from the family of George Floyd. We also want to hear from a juror, but I thought it was very interesting that the judge says, you know, if the jurors want their privacy, please give them that. And I said, Jamie, did the jurors say that they want privacy? Because everybody wants to know what happened in that jury room. I wanted to talk to you because you have been in contact with the poll reporter. We know that they've taken 10 hours, 4 last night to deliberate, 6 today. We don't know if they stopped for lunch, but let's say a total of 10. And Derek Chauvin gave no reaction whatsoever when the verdict was read. About 4:06 here in Minneapolis, 5:06 on the East Coast. What have you heard about the reaction from the jury when the verdict was read?
So this is really interesting, right? This trial has been fascinating on so many levels. Because of COVID, there's only one print reporter and one broadcast reporter allowed in, and that's what was allowed in during the reading of the verdict. So the pool reporter who was in there says that when the verdict was read, the jury was almost silent. There was no reaction from any of the members of the jury, which is really interesting because as we've been talking about, when I was inside the courtroom, I noticed all these little moments with the jurors of how intense they were on writing their notes, how engaged they were at looking at the witnesses and looking at the attorneys in the courtroom. These were very animated jurors who really were engaged and then sat silent as the verdict was read.
So it almost sounds like they made a decision amongst themselves. We're going to go out, we're going to sit in our seats, we're not going to show anything. I would just think as a defendant, you're just looking for any signs as they're walking in the room to see, do they make eye contact? What does that mean? And you said nothing.
Well, what's been interesting about this case too, Gail, and the reason a lot of people talked about Derek Chauvin taking his mask off when his defense closing arguments began is because of COVID again, everyone's wearing a mask. So it's easier to hide your emotions, right, and hide your humanity behind that a little bit because all you're getting are the eye movements
sticking out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm also curious about inside the courtroom because I kept hearing that there were, as you said, just a print and the broadcast. But for the Derek Chauvin and the George Floyd family, each could have one person in the courtroom. And I have heard that every day there was someone in there for the Floyd family.
Absolutely.
And I heard for the first couple of weeks at least, there was nobody there for Derek Chauvin. Did you hear that too?
Yes, and it was interesting because the day I was there and inside the courtroom, an older white woman showed up. She would not give her name, and when we tried to speak to her, she would turn toward the wall. She did not want to be identified in any way, but she did sit in the family seat for Derek Chauvin. Now, we don't know if she was a family member, if she was a friend, if she was just some type of supporter, but when you were in the courtroom, because of COVID protocols, again, you had George Floyd's family member who was in there every day. As you said, there were multiple family members who came to support the prosecution. Then you would have a deputy, and then for the last few days of this trial, you had someone in Derek Chauvin's support seat. But it was very jarring to look over, and they're just feet apart from each other. So the social distancing was happening, but it was jarring because, you know, in a normal courtroom, this side is this side, that side is that side, and it's pretty clear who's on what side. These two are in one corner of the room together with a deputy in between.
I was fascinated too by Derek Chauvin because he spent the whole time writing something. Do you know, I mean, he was non-stop writing. Do you happen to know what he was writing, what he was doing?
So where I sat, Eric Nelson was directly in front of me, his attorney, the defense, and then Derek Chauvin was just to the left. I don't have the best eyesight. I put on my glasses to see what he was doing. It seemed like he was writing cursive sentences or writing very quickly handwritten notes to himself. He was writing. I was seeing, was he doodling? What was he doing? I talked to a number of attorneys in town who told me that this can be a defense tactic because if they feel that their client isn't going to come off in the best manner to the jury, that this is a way to get him engaged in writing notes and looking like he's doing something else. So he's not being intense to the jury members. He's not making eye contact with them or any of the witnesses.
Okay, Jamie, I'm going to have to cut you off for a second because we see George Floyd's family is about to speak. They're represented by civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump. It looks like, I think I saw Al Sharpton in that shot as well. They're standing at the podium and they're going to... Al Sharpton is there. Jamie, my eyesight has been as bad too, but I could have sworn I saw him in a tight shot. But let's listen into what they're saying. So listen to George Floyd.
Before we say anything
anything, we're going to have prayer. When we first came to Minneapolis and went to the site, when Ben Crump called, we remembered how Eric Garner said, "I can't breathe," 11 times. His mother came with us to the site. The family came in, and this family has stood together for the last 11 months, watching this video go over and over and over again. This family stood with pain, suffering, and not knowing what the future held, because so many families went and got nothing. They thanked God when they got the indictment, which would not have happened had not the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, took this case. And Keith Ellison fought and put together a team that made this possible. And this is the first time in the history of this state that a white police officer has been convicted, less known convicted, of a murder. This is the first time in a long ring of fights that we've seen 3 counts, guilty in all 3. We don't find pleasure in this. We don't celebrate a man going to jail. We would have rather George be alive. Amen. But we celebrate that because young people, white and black, some castigated, many that are here tonight, marched and kept marching and kept going. Many of them looked down on, but they kept marching and wouldn't let this die. And this is an assurance to them that if we don't give up, that we can win some rounds. But the war and the fight is not over. Just 2 days from now, we're going to have to deal with the funeral of Daunte Wright in this same county, the same area. We still have cases to fight, but this gives us the energy to fight on. And we are determined that we're going to fight until we make federal law the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act must be law. We want to thank all that were involved, especially the Attorney General and the governor and others. We want to thank President Biden, who the first time he came out of his house during the campaign, he flew to Houston and met with the family and Attorney Crump and I. And he sat there, and I will never forget, he said to George's daughter that I heard you say your father is going to change the world. Well, we can now tell George's daughter she was right. Her father has began the changing of the world for real. But before we do anything, we first want to pray and thank God, because somehow God made a way. He had mercy. We believe in a God that can even get through the cracks of the jury room and bring conscience and bring truth. And that jury, we want to thank them for letting God give them the strength wherever they are tonight. We want them to know we broke down in tears when we heard the verdict. We had to hold each other and hug in tears because too many nights we've cried. Many of us for decades spent nights in jail. But today we can wipe our tears away and fight on for another day. There's sunlight. We're going to keep going till we bring it for the Eric Garners and the Breonna Taylor, whose boyfriend is here tonight. Kenny Walker, Sean Bell, so many that did not get this night. This night is for them. Let us pray. Let's lock arms and pray like we can, folks. Come on, Brad. Where's Falone? Right here. Yeah, come on. You and Rodney, come on front. They know you're hiding now. Brother Chris, get next to the Attorney General there. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for giving us the strength to stand together. Sometimes we would question each other. Sometimes we say this is just going to be a waste of time. But somehow you touch us in the midnight hours and teach us to hold on. And that if we would be faithful over a few things, you'd give us the victory over many. We thank you because we know it was not any doing of ours, but your loving kindness and your tender mercy that made tonight possible. Bless those that worked, that made this prosecution something they couldn't deny. Bless those policemen that got on the stand and testified against another policeman. Bless the jury that listened to the evidence and didn't listen to those that may criticize them for doing this. Bless the prosecutor, Keith Ellison, and his staff that did their job, even though they didn't know what the outcome would be. Bless Ben Crump in a special way, that worked tirelessly, that jumped on planes and left his family to make sure that justice would rain down. Thank you for all of the civil and human rights leaders that stood up. And we thank you for the nameless grandmas and grandpas that would get on their knees and ask you to give us a victory this time. And Lord, as we give you the thanks and give you the praise, let George know that his name is going down in history. They may have put their knee on his neck, but he will now be a figure that we will take the knees off our necks now, and we give you the praise. Thank you, and God, we give you the glory. These blessings we ask in your name. Amen. Amen. Let me say that I want to bring on now a man who has symbolized the fight for justice. He didn't seek the role, but he rose to the occasion. America, for many years, didn't have someone to stand for us. The last 4 years, we didn't have an attorney general's office that would even hear our cry. But we had been raised to believe that God always has a ram in the bush. And God has a way of taking the most humble of people and raising them up. We had an attorney general in Black America that has represented these cases with the acumen and skill of one that was raised in the South but came to claim this nation in a new direction. I bring you the Attorney General for Black America, Ben Crump.
Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton, not only for your mentorship, not only for being a great civil rights leader, but for being a moral authority, especially making sure no matter what happened, that we always maintain the moral high ground, knowing that we were on the right side of history as we fought for justice for George Perry Floyd Jr. Say his name. I am but a member of a great team of very talented attorneys. And I'm going to acknowledge them. Yeah, we got the Omegas and the Kappas, Reverend Jackson, and the Alphas in it. That's right. I want to acknowledge these great